My recording did not work in the classroom, so I'm recording this offline. Today I want to cover what I've researched and learned and from my previous background about being an architect, and more specifically a cloud architect. Today I'm going to talk about AWS products, the basic ones that you should know when you're selecting AWS as a cloud provider. The first question I ask myself is, where do you go to learn this material? And the first thing I would say is look at AWS documentation. They have a great plethora of resources out there and available, and it's very good material. There is introductory material along with well-written material. And in addition to that, there is labs that you can actually do hands-on. So here's the site that you can run AWS labs, and most of them are either free or very low cost of $1 to $15. Other couple options that you may have heard of that are really good out there is Coursera, Lydia, Udemy, Udacity, Khan Academy, Code Academy, and one of my favorites, YouTube, free 99. And I also have listed here some of the pricing that's available for those. At our club, we really do a lot of learning on our own, and we find free ways of doing that, and that's why I'm sharing this with you, is hopefully I can teach you things that you may not have known about AWS. So let's take a look at overall the skills I'm trying to learn in becoming a better architect are right here. And what I've done is I've taken off one of the biggest areas of people's interest is AWS. So I've broken AWS and what things you should know about AWS. So let's start in the simple category, EC2, Elastic Cloud Compute. Amazon, what they've done is really scaled virtual instances on the cloud, and there's also virtual private cloud where you can put these instances. And it is a collection of resources like your CPU, memory, and database. A couple other interesting areas to know about EC2 is there is what's called an AMI or Amazon Machine Image, and this is a prepackaged image that you can deploy in scale from 500 to 1,000 or beyond. A couple other configuration items is you have a security setup, such as IP and ports, is you can specify your traffic, whether it's a specific host or a port. And also you have key pairs, which is, think of it like your fingerprint, is a way to identify a specific host. The way that it's organized is called availability zones. And a Z is, think of as a data center. And then beyond that you have regions, and then you have geographies. So they've built AZs, and when you're building to scale, whether it's business continuity or disaster recovery, you'll want to use multiple AZs. Let's move on to the next topic, and that's S3 or simple storage. Simple storage is, think of as like another product is Dropbox or Box. It's a way to store files and folders and be able to access those over the internet. A couple of the items that you can do as part of the lab that I ran through, it takes about 30 minutes. You can create a bucket, upload objects to that bucket. You can make the objects public. You can create policies on the bucket or the specific object, and you can also version of files. There are different types of tiers and pricing for those that I've listed here. The standard is your standard SSD. Then you have infrequent, standard, and Glacier, which are more archived type of storage. The next topic is called Route 53. It's got its name from DNS traffic port 53. And if you're not familiar with DNS, DNS is a way to route traffic over the internet. It translates names to IP addresses or vice versa. There's also a free lab that I've listed here. A few things that it does in the lab is it gets you familiar with the AWS Management Console, which I'll show you a little bit later. The other steps that you can do is add a route and a health check. You can configure a DNS failover to another site. Let's say you're doing maintenance. And you can also check the health check of that failover. The next product is called ELB, or Elastic Load Balancer. This is a product that balances traffic between different sites, and what I've found is there is a few different types of devices. You have classic, you have network, and you have application. If you're familiar with the ISO layer, there's 7 different layers within your topology of a network. The application layer is the top layer, and that is similar to web traffic. So if you're trying to direct traffic to different sites, you can use the application. Network is specific a network protocol. Think of TLS or UDP or those type of ports. And then underneath that, you have lower level physical layers. Some other features that you can do is you can add, remove instances on the fly within a load balancer. You can perform health checks, and you can also set up security and logging on those ELBs. Lastly, for products I'm going to cover today is RDS, and that's Relational Database Server. This is different than a NoSQL server, which I'll get to in another session. RDS, you have fundamental databases such as Oracle or SQL Server. A few other ones that are gaining popularity. Amazon has created Aurora. This is prepackaged. There's also Postgres. You also can get MySQL. And then there's a new database that was forked when Oracle acquired MySQL, which is called MariaDB. Some features that you can do within an RDS is automatic patching and backups. You can scale your capacity on demand, and you can create high availability replicas. You can create snapshots of those backups. You can clone those to other AZs. And you can also restore with transaction logs. Transaction logs is a way to restore a database to a certain point in time. So a snapshot you can run daily, and transaction logs will get you backups in between your snapshots. Other tiers to be aware of, you have magnetic, general, provisioned, IHOP storage tiers available, and you can read about all of this on AWS site. And the different, if you're curious to how they charge by instance, running time, storage, I/O, backups, and data. Let's move on to some of the tools to manage these resources. The first one is the AWS product called CloudFormation. CloudFormation is a prepackaged AWS tool that has taken the best out of different languages that I'll talk about a little bit after this, such as deploying managed resources like LAMP or Ruby Web Services or WordPress. A LAMP server, for example, is a Linux, Apache, MySQL, and PHP. It is a quick way to get a web server running, and with CloudFormation, you can manage those at scale. And so it's a way to script this and automate a way to build those on the fly and get many, many resources. The other thing you can do is deploy the templates, and you configure them on your own with JSON. So it's configurable JSON, and you can also use the designer, which is more of a user-friendly type of interface. In addition to that, there are some languages you can use, and I did some research on which one you might want to use. And I have a good diagram here to show you. Let's go back. Here it is. And it really comes down to what you're comfortable with. It does support all of the scripting languages, so I started thinking, well, which ones should we use? There is Python, Ruby, and PHP, and here's a good example of the differences here. But mostly there are dynamic scripting languages, and with the speed of hardware these days, the scalability of these languages are not as critical as more of a compiled language. So let's go through some of these individually. Python is really growing in the market. If you're familiar with Python and you use it, it has a built-in library called Boto 3, and it's a AWS supported package that keeps current with its SDKs. And again, you manage the policies and the resources through policies, and it gives you things like auto scaling, and also a package called Fabric, which you should look into. You can do this with IPython IDLE or any other type of Python editor like Jupyter or PyCharm. The other one is Ruby. Ruby is very popular, came out in the 90s as a web type of application. It was very lightweight and it's been used a lot in the web these days. It is now becoming more scalable than it was initially. Scala has also solved for that. A couple other ones, we have Shell. AWS has created its own command line interface, which is very supportive on their APIs, obviously because it's an AWS product. You have PowerShell, which is very compatible if you're on Windows and you're familiar with commandlets, and it allows you to do things with .NET objects. That covers all the scripting languages. A few other products that I found very useful if you're looking into the AWS space that you're going to want to know. One is the continuous integration of software and deployment. A couple of products out there that are widely available are Chef and Puppet. There's also Salt, Stack, and Ansible, which are growing popularity. They're all pretty similar. They're called infrastructure as a code. And they have different terminology. For example, one's called recipes and cookbooks on the Chef side, or master and agent on the Puppet. They are most of the server versions are in Unix and Unix and Linux, and the client is on Windows. They are both a DSL or a domain-specific language. One last item to cover is Lambda. Lambda is a function as a service. Lambda does serverless computing in the cloud. It's compatible with Node.js, Java, C#, and Python. This is very useful because you only pay for what you use. And a good way to describe it is the home devices like Alexa have no computing power. It just sends it to the cloud for computing and you get back a call. So that covers all the topics for AWS. I hope you found this useful. Please send me comments. Don't forget to subscribe and like. And I hope that I will build on this in the future. Thank you for watching.